Today we're going to look at some more weld symbols. I want to start off by answering some questions that were brought up last week in class about some of the different fillet weld symbols and the names and terminology that you might find. So what we have here is a cut through of what would be a typical fillet weld. And in here, you can see that we have the weld root. That's where you have most all your penetration goes to. You have the two toes. They're the tips of the welds. You have your legs. You can have a vertical leg here and a horizontal leg here. You have the face of the weld, and then you have what's called the throat of the weld, and that's the distance back to the root up to the face. So I refer to this occasionally as rise, and this is the run, just to distinguish between the two legs, the vertical and horizontal legs. So, like I said, this week we're looking at stuff that's a little bit more complicated than last week, and so sometimes you might have what is a combination of two different weld types here. So if you look here, we have a fillet weld and a bevel. So you can see that here in this side cut here, where they have a bevel cut in here, but then if you look at the actual weld, you're filling in the bevel and then you're adding in a fillet on the far side. So that's the symbol that you're getting here. And because it's only on this one side, then we're only doing it here. We're not doing the same thing on the far side. You might end up with this R value here. Like you might end up with a number in here, and that would designate that potentially you're going to lift this piece up a little bit as well. And you can see that down here in this combination where we have a straight groove and a bevel. And here you can see that it's lifted up a little bit above where the plate is. So in continuation with that, we're going to look at some of the different types of finishing symbols that might show up in welds that you'd be looking at. So right here you would have a bevel that is that has chipping on top. So you're chipping out your excess weld. This one you'd be grinding off. Here we have your hammering, and these are all designated by a letter that is below or above if it was on the far side of the what your weld is. So we have machining, rolling, and peening. So for this next part of the talk, I want to go through a few different blueprints of different complexity. This one is rather complex, but what I really want to focus on here is the different weld callouts and what they mean. So we have a few here that are down on this point right here, and we have this call out for in two places. We are going to have a 1/4 inch bevel on one side, or a 1/4 inch fillet on one side, but it's going to go all the way around this piece. And if I zoom in there, I'll be able to show you. So you can see going around this piece, there's a 1/4 inch bevel weld that's going all the way around that piece. So then up here, we have a few different callouts, and some of these are a little interesting. I don't know what the P period type is, but what we do have is we have a bevel that is going to be a 5/16 inch deep bevel with a 1/4 inch fill weld. So you might have a little bit of a gap in there. And then up here you have a 1/4 inch bevel weld that's being called out. And so these two welds are the same weld call out here. So then we go on to the next part of that blueprint, and this shows it in more of an isometric view. And you can see here that we have a few other callouts here. We have 1/4 inch fillet welds on here, and then I believe that might be the only weld callout on this page. But like I'm going to roll back real quick here because I want to point out a few things that I didn't mention before. You can see here that there's some notes down here about the welding that you're going to be doing. So these are things that you would want to, if you were getting into this project, you'd want to make sure you read through all the fabrication notes, and then looked at some of the stuff down here. Like this tells you, we talked about this before, but this tells you what your dimensions are on the blueprint and things along those lines. But there are some, some key points here in your fabrication notes, like what your welds are supposed to be. So like they have the 1/4 inch continuous fillet unless otherwise noted. So, all right, so this is maybe a little bit more simple project. It's a small metal cart. And in here we have a few different weld callouts. So for example, we have this one, which is a double fillet. So on each side of the seam, you're gonna have an 1/8 inch fillet weld here. Whereas up here we have a double weld, but on the top part here we have a weld with a round stock coming in. So this was a V groove, I believe, and then a fillet, and then you also have their 1/8 inch beads, but you have 2-inch long beads that are 6 inches from start to start. So we have 1/8 inch for the rise and run, or the 2 legs, and then we have 2 inches and then 6 inches apart, or so 6 inch from beginning to beginning, or middle to middle, however you want to read that. And then up here we just have a double fillet weld, which is a 1/8 inch fillet weld up here. Now you might notice that there's not as much detail written down here that tells you information about what your welds are going to be. So in that case, you're looking at the blueprint itself to figure out where your welds are going to be and what they're going to be. So this doesn't have any of the other dimensional callouts in it. This is just showing what your welds are going to be. So when you have something like this, you want to you probably have another assembly part where you're either rolling the tube, or you have stuff that's spaced out, but there's no dimensional callouts here. So this would have a whole nother set of blueprints that would go with it. And in this case, we see certain things like this is a call out for the weld right here around this centerpiece coming in, and it's a 1/8 inch groove weld, and then it's got the circle and the elbow, right? So that means it's going all the way around. Where this is a 1/8 double fillet weld, and then we have a bunch of these 1/8 all the way around groove, straight groove welds. So there's a lot of the same weld in here. One thing I do want to point out is you can see here at the tail of this, you're getting a little bit of information. So this is saying that there's 4 welds that are this type. And you can see that there's 4 tabs that match up where they're calling for that weld. So in this case, you have 2, and you have 2 pieces right there. So that's what is going to happen in this part of the weld callouts. Is there's going to be some more information there, whether or not it's how many are going to be there, what type of weld it's going to be, all kinds of different things can be in this little callout here that gives you just a little bit more information about the weld type. All right, and then this one is perhaps even simpler. So this is just a welding cart. Typical first project for somebody who's starting to weld is a welding cart. And in here you can see that we have, and see here you have these callouts here, and it's just saying, hey, you're doing this on both sides. So instead of saying ×2, it's saying both sides. So at this joint here and this joint over here, and we have a 1/8 inch fillet weld, and it's being welded all the way around because of that circle in the joint, right? And then down here we have a double bevel, and you're welding into the corners on a double bevel. And it's saying this is what you do on the corners, so you look at all you would at that point in time weld all of your corners in this type, right? And then this is the call out saying, hey, how do I weld the deck to this piece here? And it's got a groove weld that is a 1 inch long bead at 4 inches apart, right? And we see the same weld call out here. It's saying type deck here and type deck here. Those are the same call outs. So just making sure that you can see it here. You also have a different call out, not for the corner joint here, but for this corner here of a groove weld that's going to go in here. And you don't have a call out for what your bead size is. So I'm guessing there would be something else here that would designate that you're going to have 1/8 inch, or maybe because you have 1/8 on everything else, that it's just assumed that you do a 1/8 inch bead in all these other places. All right, and then finally what we have here is a call out on this seam here around the circle. It's a 1/8 inch fillet weld on the outside of this, and it's spaced at 1 inch beads 4 inches apart. So from the start of the bead to the start of the bead to the next bead, you'd have 4 inches there if you were laying those out. And that's all I had for this week. A lot of what went on in class, if you missed class, was just some questions about the blueprints, and I actually had a little bit more interactive, let people call out what the welds were. If you have questions about those blueprints or anything else and you weren't in the class, or even if you were in the class, feel free to send me an email and we can go over them. Thanks.